Hey friends, welcome back to The Return Project. Life has a way of knocking us down, pulling us off track, and leaving us in a place we never planned to be. But here's the truth. Those very moments become the foundation for our greatest returns. Our mission is to become the beacon of hope, a light in the dark, and to walk beside those searching for a way out. Every guest we bring to this space proves that no matter how deep the darkness, there's always a light. There's always a hand extended, showing the way through. This podcast is about resilience, redemption, and transformation, moving from the lows to the highs, from the darkest valleys to the breakthrough that changes everything. I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project.
Welcome back to another incredible episode. This is our mini-series on business and leadership, where we are going to focus on powerful, in-depth, and really deep topics surrounding the world of true leadership, authentic leadership, how business affects our personal lives, and how we grow within all of these realms. And today we have a gentleman sitting across from us who has 30 years of leadership experience. He is the CEO and founder of the Arquess Group. He has his own podcast, and we can't wait to hear how it all began and how he brought it to the point that he's now, because this gentleman sitting across from me has done incredible things. We have Dusty Holcomb sitting with us to share his powerful insights, explain to us the mastermind that he just attended, and how he's continually growing, developing leaders into powerful, confident, authentic selves, essentially. So, Dusty, thank you so much for joining us.
Bryan, thanks so much for having me. When you reached out, I was really captivated by this concept of overcoming and rebuilding and replatforming. When I reflected on, when I learned about you and I started reflecting on what that meant, it reminded me of a conversation someone once had with me as I was, going through the process of applying to college. And the admissions counselor that I was meeting with told me, he said, Dusty, not everyone is cut out for college. Maybe you should consider going into a trade, or maybe you should consider trade school. And I remember thinking, what you think of me does not define me. And I very specifically went back and saw him 4 years later and handed him a copy of my diploma, summa cum laude, and said, thank you for the motivation to help get me over this hump. And, we aren't defined by what others think. We are defined by what we choose to do and how we choose to react based on what others think. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Just from that, I can't wait to dig into the depths of this, because we all know you didn't start as a powerful leader. You didn't start as a CEO. You didn't start your journey of leadership from where you are today. Take us back to the beginning and share how you walked through to the point you are today.
There's a common corollary that I think all great leaders have, is that you never abandon the role of student. And a leader is a student. The greater your influence, the greater your impact grows, the more of a student you have to become. And so if I go back to the beginning, I grew up in a very small rural town in eastern Georgia, and my dad was a county extension agent. And so he worked with farmers. Because we were so rural, in fifth grade, I started being homeschooled. And my entire learning process from, age 10, through the end of high school age was based on what I chose to learn, read, and absorb. And I was fascinated with military history. I was fascinated with history. I was very much invigorated by learning how others made decisions. And I didn't know what that meant. It was just curiosity. And because I was autodidactic in that way, and I was a self-learner, I chose to focus on the things that intrigued me and interested me, and had no idea what that would mean from a career perspective. Had no idea what that would mean from a leadership perspective. But the roots of who I became as a leader were formed by the choices I made as a child about what to read and what to explore. And the reason that I go to a college admissions counselor, at the completion of the high school era, and him telling me, hey, you're not cut out for college, was dependent upon the fact that I had a GED and I didn't have great SAT scores, because I didn't choose to study math. I didn't choose to study all those things that were necessary but not fun. And because of that, I didn't position myself in a way to fit the profile of the standard person. But that turned out to be one of the greatest gifts of my life.
I can absolutely relate to that, as throughout my high school years, Well, I was what I like to call a free thinker. I never wanted to buckle down. As you were saying, I wanted to focus on the things that really caught my attention. So math and science and a few of the other academics, they were not my core aspects. I dove into entrepreneurship, leadership, psychology, the things that really caught my attention. And I really think that there are people whose brains work like ours, way more out there, trying to figure out how they fit the mold when we're told this is what you're supposed to do, but here's what our brains are wired to do and what we are attracted to. Someone developing themselves in the business world, into leadership, how do they find that balance of this is what the world's telling me to do, this is what I want to?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that there are fundamentals of understanding that are necessary. I learned when I got into college that it wasn't that I wasn't good at mathematics. In fact, I was really good at it and I loved it. I just didn't have the foundational frameworks installed with help from another. And so the lesson from that was I needed help. I needed a guide to get me to a basic level. And so being able to say, hey, I need a foundational level of understanding that enables me to then go deeper on the things that inspire and bring passion to life. So I need to, if, I don't like science or I don't like math, I think that those are easy excuses to say, I don't want to spend time here. And sometimes we need just those frameworks because the things we learn in mathematics or science or whatever area it is that doesn't inspire you have foundational components that help you be better at what it is you really love to do. But once you get past that foundational learning, man, just being able to understand, hey, this is what rejuvenates my spirit. This is where my mind naturally gravitates to. This is where I can find my creative force, the things that you do that where time ceases to be linear and just becomes a place where you look up and you go, man, I just spent 4 hours on this and it was wonderful. But not selling out and saying, I don't need those other things, really just kind of stepping back and looking at, I need what skills in order to allow me to do and spend my time focus on what I love the most.
Let's go back to the point where someone told you you'd be better off going to trade school. How did you not let that and anyone else speaking into your life saying that, you should go in this direction and that you might not be cutting out for university or college, really not sink into you? How did you allow that to motivate you? And then at the end of it, what was that feeling when you were able to show them that diploma and be like, thanks for motivating me?
I think that there's two types of people in this world. And I'm being overly generalistic here. But if I were to distill it down, and that's what I like to do with things, is distill to the simplest, most impactful frameworks. There's only two types of people in the world. Those are the people to whom the world happens and those who choose to happen to the world. And those who choose to let the world happen to them intentionally or unintentionally embrace a victim's mindset. Now, horrible things happen, terrible things happen to people, but we get this power of choice. And I remember reading as a young man, probably 12, 13 years old was the first time I read it, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And it became one of my most favorite books. I reread it every year. I just finished rereading it a few months ago for my annual study. And it is the power of choice, that in between an action and a reaction, we as people have the opportunity to choose. And that really became the framework that for me was when something happens, I get to choose how I'm going to respond to it.
Yeah.
And because of my background, because I was homeschooled, because I didn't have all of the typical experiences of my peers and friends and things once we moved to a larger city, I always felt a little bit isolated, but I always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, the need to prove myself, the need to say, I hear you. I don't accept your judgment or your prescription, and I will choose a different response. And, I don't think that I didn't have like one seminal moment where it all unlocked for me. I could only see some of these things in the rearview mirror. But when I look back and I think about the books I studied, the leaders I learned from, the people that were influencing my life, they were always the ones who said, you are not defined by what another person says. You were defined by what you do. And you were defined by the decisions you make. And just make good decisions. And you don't have to be perfect. In fact, perfect is the enemy of progress. Just make good decisions. And so how I felt when I went back, and that was a huge motivator all through college. I've always been an overachiever. There's so many things I've done in life that are people like me shouldn't do, whether it's racing Ironman or doing, any other number of things. The motivation throughout college was I am smart, and grades are a measuring stick of that. What do I need to do in order to achieve these grades? And then it became less, after a year or so, it was less about grades and it was all about learning, because then I was really getting into things I enjoyed. And I went, screw the grade. I'm going for what I want to learn. And that became a seminal moment for me.
You talk about having a chip on your shoulder and having to prove yourself a little bit. I know many people that find themselves in that position, they actually drive themselves to a place of burnout. They actually want to overachieve, and they get to a place where they take that into what I'm going to call a bit of a negative level. They do nothing but try to prove themselves and lose themselves into that aspect of how hard they work. Their self-worth gets involved into I'm only my work. You kind of talked about a little bit about staying with, but I'd love to dive into more. How did you avoid that side of the world? How did you not fall into that trap of, I have to prove myself, but it is burning me out?
Yeah, candidly, I wrestle with that every day today. And so over the years, I had to learn frameworks that would enable me to install a circuit breaker that would prevent me from doing it. But I still wrestle with that. And, I think that it is easy to make excuses and say, well, I'm just this way because I'm passionate or because I have a chip on my shoulder, et cetera. But if you get out of your own self and how you are thinking about it and realize that there's an impact on others based on your behaviors, well, that's strong watch out. And if you're a person with narcissistic tendencies, maybe that doesn't motivate you. But you have to also think about, or maybe narcissistic's too strong of a word, if you're not thinking about other people, but you also have to step back and think about what is it that is going to prevent me from showing up in the most powerful way possible with these hours. So I'll give you an example. So how I wrestled with it and navigated it, because I was the person who would go, I am passionate about something. And then I went all in, like 100%. There was no off switch. When I started playing the drums, I was all in. When I started, whatever it was. And I always gave myself the excuse to say, I'm just passionate about this. And so it's okay for me to be like this. But what happened is I was burning myself, and I realized that there was a diminishing rate of return on the hours or the time invested. And so I had to start figuring out, okay, how can I maximize the quality of invested time, measure it against an output of results, and make sure that I am creating balance in other domains of life that feed the passion. And so not putting in 80 hours on something in a week, and instead going, okay, the 10 hours I need to have working out or doing physical activity or whatever actually made the 60 hours of work effort of higher quality. But that was a journey through time. That was a journey through learning. And it is a journey I still wrestle with today, because I am deeply passionate about what I do. I'm deeply motivated by who I serve and how I show up for them. And I have a very high resilience drive. Every assessment, personality profile I've ever taken, have me in the 1% of stamina, or got whatever the wording they use. And so I have to watch out for that. Like that's not a positive thing. That's a negative thing, because it's not just impacting the quality of work that I do within the hours I have. It's impacting the relationships that I value. And so I just have to look at this lens of a scale, and how do I balance my life energy amongst 4 quadrants: professional, personal, family, and community or spiritual. And so I'm actively trying to, if you think of those as 4 legs on a table, I'm trying to navigate the tension of how long each of those legs are, and understanding at times they're going to be way out of whack. But how do I do a better job of balancing? I don't believe in work-life balance at all. I don't think that that's a truism. What I do believe in is that we as humans are constantly navigating the tension of balancing. And so doing that is how I avoid burnout, and how I help prevent the chip on my shoulder from driving me right into the ground.
There's about 15 different questions that you just sent my brain spiraling with.
Sorry, I should have been a little shorter.
Absolutely not. No, it was really, there was pieces in there where I'm going, I get this and I'm understanding it. But where I wanted to start on this was the aspect of somebody such as myself and many people out there who are a little bit that ADHD, and we get that all or nothing mentality, and that it has to be perfect or it's not worth doing. Or we get hyper fixated on something and we spend 80 hours in a day trying to do something and it has to be perfect, even though it might not be the quality. How do we not get to that position where when that hyperfixation lowers, that dopamine level now has dropped on this current project that we're doing, how do we stay connected to it? How do we stay consistent and keep going through it and not bounce to the next idea or the next idea after that?
It's a wonderful question. I'm glad you went there. I think the first thing that we as leaders have to do is lead ourselves. And the number one way to do that is we have to anchor to our purpose. We have to understand why we're here. And that's a journey, that's an evolution that will evolve. But once you have some type of understanding of why we are here, what we are put here to do, or you believe that you have a directional towards that, what is your vision? So understanding on those days where the dopamine drops, you can go back to your purpose, you can go back to your vision, and you can check in with that and say, is this a place of resistance that I need to push through? There's a wonderful book by Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art, and he talks about the resistance. Is one of my favorites. But when you press through that, and so being able to objectively think about, is this a place I need to press through? Or is this a place where I need to pause and rejuvenate? Because I think that's being able to step away and get outside of our own heads and get outside of the emotional connection and be rational is because you can do that when you have an anchor of purpose. You can do that when you have a vision you're trying to achieve. But you mentioned something I really want to touch on, like this perfection bias, I can't do it right, I don't want to do it. And then I'm going to get to a point where I give up because it's not perfect. You can augment that, or you can offset that a little bit when you've got the anchor of purpose and vision. Number one. Number two, you have to be able to step back and go, what is the quality of output that is demanded of me or that is necessary from me for this next phase? And so oftentimes we get so hyper fixated as people on the penultimate goal and not the next step. And I've fallen victim to this many, many times where I'm thinking so much about the goal that I'm not thinking about the quality of deliverable necessary for the next step in the journey. And so being able to break these things down and move from the future back and say, okay, this is what the future looks like. This is what perfect looks like. I cannot get there now, but what does the next step look like? And break that into a milestone. And I'll use a quick, when you're swimming, when you're racing Ironman, you swim a 2.4 mile swim. And that's intimidating. That's scary, especially if you're in open water like the ocean and blah, blah, blah. You never swim 2.4 miles. And this applies to marathon, the bike, anything else. You swim to the next buoy. You swim to the next milestone. And you don't then sit there and go, well, I'm just going to swim 200 meters to the next buoy. You say, okay, that's where I'm going. And I'm going to focus on the next perfect stroke. I'm going to make the next swim stroke that I have good. And if it doesn't go perfectly and somebody kicks you or, throws you off your stride, that's okay. You're going to say, I'm going to take 2 beats and breathe. And then I'm going to go stitch together 3 perfect strokes. And so being able to get out of the hyper goal fixation and chunk it down to what is appropriate now and anchored in purpose and anchored in vision is what allows me and allows the leaders that I work with to avoid the trap of perfect over progress.
That is brilliant. And I'm going to have to apply some of that to myself because I'm guilty of it. 100%. I get stuck on that constantly. It's an area that in my growth spectrum that I'm always reminding myself to take a breath, look at it from a different angle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. As you just put it very eloquently, it's about my next strides forward. I see perfect and I want perfect, but let's focus on what are the next steps? What are the strides? It comes down to a lot of framework. And in your leadership experience, you've built a couple of different frameworks that have really helped leaders take that next level. I'd love for you to dive in with our audience. What are the frameworks you've built that have really transitioned leaders and helped them take those next steps?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And, I want to go back to one thing you said before I answer that question, if you don't mind. One of my first mentors gave me the greatest wisdom that I never understood until maybe the last 5 years. And he gave me this wisdom when I was 21. And it was my first major leadership role. And he said, Dusty, because I was hyper fixated on getting the promotion, getting the next level. And Colonel Camp said, Dusty, I don't know that this will land, but if you remember nothing from me, remember that the journey of a leader is not about the goal. It is about appreciating the journey and learning on the way. And I would like to say that became this beautiful open moment. And I spent the next 30 years really living that. I didn't. I was hyper focused on the goal for so many years. And only in hindsight did I start learning how to appreciate the journey, and now still have to guard against that, but can revel in the value of what I'm learning in each and every day from each and every person that I interface with. So I just wanted to share that for your audience. Like, sometimes the greatest gift you get is that next incremental step on the path to perfection, on the path. But it is the beautiful moment of growth and learning. So it took me a lot of years of experience to do that. So I just wanted to share that.
Before we dive into that previous question, now that you got my brain on this, I want to share this with you real quick. One of the greatest pieces of advice that it took me a few moments to understand on my perspective. You ever heard the phrase that slow is fast? And I'm one of those people that I've probably heard that 1,000 times until one of my great mentors looked at me and said, Bryan, slow is fast. And I realized something just hit me in that moment that I've been spending so much time charging forward, trying to think that, efficiency was good and that everything, if I did it quicker, we got to the goal. But I didn't realize I was missing details. I was missing core steps. I was skimming off the top a little bit to try and get there. And I had to slow down to make things go faster.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I just literally 2 weeks ago released an episode on my podcast where I talk about that exact principle. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is smooth. It took me years to understand this. Smooth is fast. And it is the power of being able to slow down to really integrate the frameworks and the mindsets allows you to go fast later. And I'm so glad that you've been exposed to that. And it's one of my core principles of learning in life. And, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to that at 16. And, it's been one of the greatest things I've ever learned.
I wish I could go back to being 16 and someone told me that then. The things that would have changed, I've learned that at 35 and I'm going, oh, I wish I knew that way sooner. Or if I wish I was in a point to hear it and understand it much sooner. That's a big difference.
That's the key. That's the key. Being able to be at a point and hear it and understand it. I heard it. I thought I understood it. It really, the depth of meaning was built over many, many years.
Yeah. Okay. Let's spin back to the frameworks. These are all core components of it, but I'd love to know, because you've built some really powerful frameworks that have really helped leaders take those next steps. And let's dive into those a little bit.
Yeah. So framework number one, and maybe this is philosophy number one, and I'll get to a framework here in a second. But the first tenet of leadership success, in my opinion, and I'm always willing to be wrong, but I don't think I am on this one, is leadership is not about you. Leadership is about the service that you provide to others. And the same gentleman I mentioned earlier, Colonel Camp, that was probably the greatest gift he gave me, which is when he taught me, here is what leadership is. Leadership is not about you. Leadership is about what you do for those that you serve and how you serve them in order to create their success. And he, he was a retired colonel. He said, look, if I take care of my soldiers and make sure they understand the mission and I serve them, they achieve the mission. That's how this works. So that framework of understanding that it is not about you is what has driven me my entire life. And core principle here is the ability to lead yourself first is the absolute first principle of effective leadership. And what does that mean? Leading yourself means you understand that you need to grow, that you have flaws, that you have skills that you need to adapt and learn so that you can become more impactful. And these things will move in a journey through life. It's like you climb a mountain and then you get to a plateau and then you have to climb another mountain. Like, it goes back to that first statement I made. It's like, leaders are curious. All leaders are always learning. Harry S. Truman once said that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Like, so you just have to learn. From a framework perspective, understanding that in order to impact and influence the lives of others, you must lead yourself. And there's a wonderful quote that says, to know oneself is above all to know what one lacks. It is to measure oneself against the truth and not the other way around. The first product of self-knowledge is humility. And that's Flannery O'Connor. And what's so powerful about that is you have to look inside. You have to say, here's what I lack. So the frameworks I've built and have helped other leaders understand is lead yourself first. And what does that mean? It means you need to have that deep anchor to purpose. You need to have that deep anchor on your vision. It means you need to have objectives and goals and a system of achieving those things. And when you do that, you can cast it into an organization. You can cast it into teams. And I have developed a 5-question framework that allows leaders to create exceptional discretionary effort within their organizations. And I'll dig into that in a second, but I'll pause here because I know I just said a lot and I want to let you lean into that.
I've been learning everything that you're talking about, and my brain is just taking in these pieces because I look at it and go, one of the core aspects that I think a lot of us need to understand too is what are our learning styles? You know, as you were saying that it was leaders are readers. In our world of technology nowadays, and it's something I had to address, I'm not a super strong reader. Reading is a little bit tough for me, but yet we now have the option of things like audiobooks. And I love audiobooks. I can consume them all day long. And that is how I have learned that my learning style is a little more audio, having to listen to it taken in. And I think that's a really powerful thing for people to understand, especially as leaders. What are our learning styles? Because we all learn differently, and that's okay. But when we can figure out those core pieces or ways to work around how we can handle each of those learning styles, that's where we can really take those next steps. Because you can sit there and try and struggle to be a reader all day long. You can say, you know, leaders are readers, and force yourself, I'm going to read all these books, and you're not retaining anything. You're taking 6 months to read one book, you know. So what do we do to fix that? That's where my brain went, and I went, okay, here's the solution to that. Now it's an audiobook, and I can get through 2 or 3 audiobooks in a week easily.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that the learning style is so powerful and important. And I think we're in the greatest age of being able to address disparate learning styles or different mediums in history, right? So you can go to a TED Talk, you can go to a audiobook, you can go to a podcast, you can get all these nuggets. I think the most important element is to read, to learn, let's just call it reading or learning, regardless of medium. When you are learning to take this information and do something with it, what is the learning to apply, learning to take this and apply it into? And there's great value. Like I'm like you, I actually prefer an audiobook unless it's a topic I want to study. And then I really want to take notes and blah, blah, blah. But those are different things, you know, and sometimes reading is a pleasure. What I think I personally like the most about reading is it forces me to slow down. But what I love most about audiobooks or video, it forces me to learn differently. And then I can listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook and take notes. And like, as long as I'm taking this stuff in and applying it and finding things that are not just in the echo chamber of things I already believe, but might actually be antithetical to my own beliefs because it forces me to think differently. I think we're in the greatest stage of learning that we've ever had. I think the greatest watch out we have to have now is we are also in an age of summarization. We are in an age of learning without depth. And because we can take a book, or we can go read a summary of a book, or we can just go ask ChatGPT, what is the topic of this book? But we're not getting we haven't done the reps, so to speak. We've taken we've gotten an immediate result. And so I think we just have to watch out and get as much information as we can and apply it in the way that makes the most impact.
But you brought up a great point in there that we have a bit of a tendency in our society now to want that immediate result, and we forget to put in the reps. My belief is that strong leaders, confident leaders, and powerful leaders are those who have absolutely put in thousands of reps. They are the people who started from a single rep and just kept putting in the reps day in, day out. When it got ugly, when it got hard, when we had easy days, we had days we wanted to give up and just quit and say, screw the hell out of this. They just kept putting in the reps. Where it takes my brain, and I'd love for you to dissect this, is consistency. How do our strong leaders keep putting in those reps? How do we show up on the days when our brains are telling us, the world is telling us, screw this, we throw our hands up in the air and it gets too hard, but we choose to be consistent. And that can be a struggle for some people.
Yeah, it can be a struggle for everybody if they're, we're being honest. And I think the definition of reps changes as we go through our leadership journey. There's the reps we have to do from learning and doing the work ourselves. Then there's the reps we need to do from learning from others and applying the lessons they've learned into our own journeys. And then there's the reps of learning how to assemble people who are better and smarter than we are and focus on asking better questions and learning how to do reps of questions so that we can orient them towards the common vision. But to your question, how do we not give up? How do we maintain the stamina on those days when it's hard? I think that, man, I hate to keep going back to it, but it goes back to this idea of purpose and vision. Am I anchored? What is my compass point across the horizon that I'm going to? Will that inspire and motivate me to do the work I don't want to do when I need to do it? I went to Auburn University, and so for me to quote Nick Saban tells you how powerful I think this framework is. But, Nick Saban has a wonderful video where he talks about discipline. And he talks about discipline is doing the things you don't want to do because you know you need to do them. And you do not allow yourself not to do them. He also talks about how excellent, outstanding, incredible talent doesn't like mediocre talent. And mediocre talent doesn't like incredible, excellent, outstanding talent. And it's because there's two standards. And at the mastermind group this past week, we were talking about that I was at. We were talking about our standards and how are we setting and maintaining and raising our standards. So to your question, you have to ask yourself, if I do the work, will I be better? And it's that moving me towards my vision. That will give me the strength of character, the strength of the mental fortitude to persevere. If it doesn't matter and you're just doing the reps to say you did the reps, I think then that's when people can check out. So you've got to make sure that they're the reps that matter. And that's hard to do because sometimes we get into this doom loop of I'm just going to do the reps. We have to continually audit our lives to make sure the reps we're putting in are aligned with our purpose and our vision.
You couldn't have said that any better. And I hold on to that as core facets. We can call it, your why factor. You can call, as you put, the compass that leads you forward and making sure that those are aligned. I do love how you talked about having to assess them and make sure that they're staying aligned there. Let's jump a little bit forward here. And you've walked this powerful path of leadership and you turned it into becoming the founder and the CEO of the Arquess Group. What is the Arquess Group?
We're a leadership consulting firm. We work with leaders and teams to help install and build their own leadership infrastructure, their leadership operating systems. And one of the core tenets, as I mentioned a minute ago, is this principle of lead yourself first. So we help leaders install leadership operating systems that enable them to lead themselves and impact the lives of others through team leadership, organizational leadership, thought leadership, etc. And it is the blessing of my life to be able to serve other leaders on their journeys and help them install the frameworks and systems that impact the lives of others.
Within that, then you also built your own powerful podcast, The Leadership Unlocked. How did that come about?
That came about by, honestly, as I exited the roles of CEO or president in where I'm leading organizations, I realized that one of the things that I most enjoy is learning from others. So not having, an executive team around or, some of these opportunities, I'm like, man, how do I continue to sharpen and learn from other great leaders? And then also, how do I take their lessons and unlock them so others can learn from it? So I had people and mentors over the years say, Dusty, you should have a podcast. Dusty, you should have a podcast. And I couldn't really wrap my head around it because I didn't want it to be the Dusty Holcomb show. It was about how do I help others unlock? And so it was a seed planted many years ago and finally just said, you know what? I can either sit around and think about a great idea or I can just do it. I have no idea if anyone will listen to it, but I will get to learn. I will get to help other people unlock some of their great values and stories. And I will get to share some of the wisdom that's been given to me over the years with other people. And that's how I got there. And I've been blown away. We only launched earlier this year and we're already in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. And it's just been super cool to see the resonance that talking with other people about the inflection point moments in their journey and then the lessons they've learned, how that can apply. And we can take these principles, these lessons, these frameworks, and become better ourselves. And, it was partially because I wanted to learn from others and partially because I want to impact and help others learn and grow. And I have a big, hairy, audacious goal, as Jim Collins would say, a BHAG for the work that we will do at the Arquess Group. And I want us to impact the lives of 100 million leaders. And I don't know how to do that. I really don't know how to do that. But conversations like this, conversations that I have on Leadership Unlocked, conversations and lessons that we have with the leaders that we work with is all part of that journey. And so and I'll never know, I'll never be able to measure with a degree of specificity 100 million. But I know that if one person listens to this conversation and does something different that impacts the life of another person, that's pretty cool. And it's not about me, it's about service.
Oh, how we're speaking the same language here and everything you're saying, I'm going, that is the absolute mission behind what we have going on here at the Return Project and my value system and my standards of how I want things to be. I've always spoken about it in what I call it's the ripple effect. I want to be that rock that I've thrown out into the ocean to create ripples. And I'm never going to get to know where those ripples have gone and who those ripples have touched and how many ripples I created. But I know I will continue to throw that rock into that pond. Sometimes they're going to be small pebbles. Sometimes they're going to be big old boulders and just keep making ripples. My mission is to make as many ripples as I can humanly put out there. So I relate 100% to everything that you're saying there. Looking forward in our life here, it's an aspect of we've had these opportunities, both of us, to take in powerful wisdom. We've had incredible mentors in our life. We've had these people that have spoken into us. If you could narrow it down to one, I'm going to say greatest piece. What is the one biggest, greatest piece of advice, wisdom that you've been shared that you've held on to or been a core staple in your life?
It'll go back to Colonel Camp at age 21, where he told me what leadership was. And he shared with me that we are here to serve other leaders. But he brought that to life himself for me when I resigned from that organization. And I was terrified. I'd worked for Greg for a couple of years. I have so many things that I still do today because of the impact and influence he had on me, behaviors that I've had for 30 years. And I was terrified to resign because I didn't expect to leave. I loved that company and I loved working for him. And I thought that I would retire from that company. And I had an opportunity I couldn't pass up. It was just too good at age 23 for me to do something I had no business doing. And it was like, okay, I have to do this. But I agonized over the resignation letter. And then I walked into his office and I gave it to him. And he read it. And I can still see him to this day. He took off his reading glasses and he sat there and he goes, well, Dusty, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. And the way he responded to that was so powerful for me because then he unpacked it and he shared the why. And he said, one of the greatest gifts that I had in my career as a military leader, as an officer who's a West Point graduate, a Vietnam veteran, he said, one of the greatest gifts of my career was the understanding that when soldiers were entrusted to me, I would only have 2 to 3 years to care for them, to serve them, to enable them for their next billet, for their next opportunity. So I always knew that the best people would leave. And because of that, it was never about holding on to them. It was never about limiting them. It was always about unleashing them. And that principle of serving others that he taught me, and then how he applied that when I quit, when I resigned to chase another opportunity, is a leadership lesson that has carried with me through my entire career. And it's, if I were to be completely transparent and reflective here, I would say that it is even what has enabled me to start this firm and do the work I do today, not to hold on to knowledge, but to empower and unlock the potential of others, which is the slogan of my company. And that's the principle that applies throughout life.
That's nothing more than beautiful. Like I actually am sitting here going, wow, like that would be a moment that I can see why you hold on to that for absolutely forever. Looking forward,
it's 20, 30 years ago, and I was so blessed.
You're obviously somebody who is driven, who has a life of curiosity, who is continuing to learn, and you've done some incredible things such as run Ironmans, and you've built this Arquess Group, you've built a successful podcast. But what's next? What is your new big, hairy, audacious goal? What keeps you going forward, and what are you aspiring to now?
Yeah, what I'm aspiring to now, and over the last year have really built and found so much power in assembling leaders who are at different inflection points of their journey and really helping them do three things. Like the pain points that I've uncovered and seen over with leaders over the years have always come down to three broad but basic things. Number one, they're frustrated because there's a gap between the vision they have and the results that they're getting. And, whether they're leading others, large teams, companies, whatever, there's a frustration there. Two, there is a sense of overwhelm. They're the bottleneck. All the decisions come back to them. And that is frustrating, and it's draining, and it creates burnout and a whole number of other things. And three, they feel isolated. They feel alone. They feel lonely. And leadership is lonely. That is a truism. It doesn't have to be, but it is necessary in certain roles and places and organizations, because you as a leader cannot, if you're leading a company and you have a deep, dark worry, you can't go tell everybody in the company, I have a deep, dark worry. You have to, that isn't the right information to share, but you need to be able to share that information. So as I've navigated those things with other leaders and for myself over the last 30 years, and what I started realizing is if we take a really good leadership operating system, the tools and principles that I've assembled and helped others with, and we put it in a package that allows leaders to install that operating system over a set of period of time, and that period of time is that we use is 12 weeks. But that's because, hey, you go to a conference, you read a book, you get a podcast, you're going to apply 10% of what you learn. You can't capture it all. You need time to do it. And then the third thing is, how do we take and assemble like-minded leaders into a cohort where they sharpen against each other, where they learn together, they apply together, and they share vulnerably what it is that's keeping them awake at night. And so that's what excites me right now, is we're building out these leadership accelerators that allow people to do those things. And it's so powerful to work with leaders and see them unlock this. And then to take that and then transfer that into the councils that we're building, where they continue their journey in their accountability and their vulnerability and their success. That's what excites me, is because that ripple effect can be so powerful, and we get to work with leaders and we get to see them on their journey and help them navigate the chasm that's in front of them in their next inflection point of growth. That's what excites me.
That actually sounds exhilarating. Here's a rabbit trail that I want to dive down real quick that I cannot forget to bring up. It's going to be a little bit of a side piece here, but I have an important philosophy when it comes to my leadership, that I am always looking at who's at my round table. I call it who is sitting at my table. And I want to know from your perspective, for powerful leaders, people stepping into leadership, CEOs, how important is knowing and assessing who's at their round table?
That's a wonderful question. And it's a very powerful insight. I think the most important thing that a person of influence must do, and John Maxwell said leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, is assemble a cohort of people around you at your round table who think different than you, who can provide perspective to you, who can add value to you. And so assessing that round table and pruning, choosing, aligning is, I think, one of the most powerful things a leader can and must do to really exponentially impact their own influence. And if you don't do that, you are limited by the things that you learn, the experiences that you have. When you do that, and when you do it well, you do get an iron sharpening iron. That's the proverb that I base so much of our work around. And I've had the privilege of being in forum groups for 20 plus years. So I've had this a formal, board of advisors or roundtable for 20 plus years. It is critical. It is impactful. It is an inflection point of growth. And I don't personally care how people do it. I just absolutely recommend that you do it. It's hard. You got to learn how to do it, but man, having a board of advisors, it's why I belong to mastermind groups. It's why I put things into group systems, because the power of divergent perspectives allows you to more closely triangulate the truth. Well, one of the things that I believe is that you cannot read the label on the jar from inside the jar. And so you have to get outside. And that's what this board of advisors helps you do.
You put that amazingly. We could dive down a billion other rabbit trails and have an 8-hour conversation on leadership, because I could continue to pick your brain for days upon days of everything under the umbrella of leadership here. And you seem like someone who's probably got a handful of answers for most of what I've got to ask. Although this seems like a great place to bring our conversation full circle. And at the end of every one of my podcasts, I like to pose a really personal and deep question to pick people's brains on here. So Dusty, the question I throw out to everybody is, what is your definition of truly living your best life?
I love that you asked this question. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, at the end of the day, how do you measure whether or not it was a successful day? So for me, the answer to your question is, have I, through how I've shown up, created an opportunity for others to be better? Have I, through my service, positively impacted the lives of others? My personal mission statement is to empower success in others. And at the mission of my life, the purpose of my life is to have shared something through experiences on my journey or things that I've learned that will allow someone else to have a greater impact on the life of someone else. And that's what I do. And I measure my success on a daily basis based on whether or not I was able to provide something that would serve another person. And sometimes it is simple as being able to do that for my bride or my children. And sometimes it's as profound as a conversation like this, which I know I will never know if it actually helped anyone, but I can feel that it might. And that's good enough for me.
We have such the same mindsets on this. It is powerful. For myself, the power of serving people. It's what I wake up to do. I'm here to be of service, whether to it's a complete stranger, to my lovely wife and my children. Every day I wake up and go, who can I serve today? Who can I put myself out to? And we never get to know if it really helped them or what it's going to do. But knowing that we took that opportunity, that we were there, that we were in a place that, you know what, we served them. And we know that we gave it our heart. Love it. So Dusty, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an incredible conversation. I know I've taken things in and I've learned stuff, and I have completely been hung on to every word you've had to say on leadership here today. So I can tell that our audience is going to be hanging on to each word as well. I'm going to put in notes everywhere for everybody to find you, learn more about you, connect with you, because you are a man they need to learn from. Dusty, thank you so much for joining us.
Bryan, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and appreciate the opportunity to share.
That's a wrap on today's episode. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for showing up with honesty, depth, and wisdom. And thank you for listening in. I hope something in this conversation stirred something in you, a memory, a reminder, or maybe even a return to a part of yourself that's been waiting. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a quick 30-second favor? Share it with someone you know, someone who might need to hear this message too. And don't forget to explore past episodes. There's so much more waiting for you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project.